Greetings, friends.
Hello.
Hello, thank you for joining us today. Allowing. We named this Allowing.
Allowing what? That's the question.
Allowing.
Well, let's talk about the opposite.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
often a good way to start
Mhm.
because what we're talking about, of course, when we're talking about allowing, is not something that's super simple to explain. It's a nuanced sort of thing.
Mhm.
But we're all pretty familiar with the flip side.
Yeah, that would be forcing.
Forcing.
In general, I think we're talking about life and things to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Patience is not something that we seem to cultivate or instill. We all know that patience is important, but I think that some of the forcing comes from this idea of instant gratification or there's a lot behind it. And I didn't even start. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead
Yeah.
of things here, but all of a sudden, all of this started coming into me. Whoa, wait a second.
Yeah, I mean, it's in a way. So you talked about waiting. That our culture can see what we call passivity. So you're watching a situation unfold in front of you, whether this is something in politics or it's something that's happening with someone saying some words to you that aren't very kind, or even our own emotions
Mm-hmm.
coming up. And we've learned somewhere along the line that the proper thing is to act very quickly. And sometimes quick action is very appropriate, but often we benefit a lot from stepping back, from watching, from gathering more information, from being a little curious instead of judging just very
Yeah.
quickly what the situation may be.
It seems as though we've got the forcing, which is really wanting to make something happen. And it doesn't necessarily even mean a bad thing. We can just want a change and we can want to be our best self or, you know, healthier, exercise more, or whatever. There can be a lot of things that we want that one would argue are positive, and yet we really want to make that happen. I'm going to make sure I drink my 8 glasses of water every day. And then there's sort of the flip side, which is allowing. And that could sound like not ever making anything happen, but I think it's more, if I think of parenting, when the girls were little, there would be things I would kind of know they could do, and yet they would be afraid or hesitant, or they wouldn't think they could because they were missing one little piece. And it was very, very, very tempting as a parent to want to go, no, you can do it. Look, if you have to take that piece and put that piece there, and then you've done it, honey. But that to me wasn't the same as allowing them to uncover and learn for themselves that they could figure out how something worked, or they could take the time they wanted to learn how to ride a bike or swim or be okay with sleeping in their own room. And I think that the allowing is that kind of allowing that gives time and space so that things can set into place differently and making it happen.
Yeah, I think this plays out in sweeping social ways too. I think of any moment in history
Mm.
that that people are living under a governing body. There are probably a lot of people that are very happy with the governing body, and a lot of people that are very dishappy.
Dishappy. Unhappy?
Unhappy with
Dishappy. That's a new word. That's like more than unhappy.
yeah, it's more than that. with the way things are. But what the mistake we all can make there is that when we see humans just aren't super good at systems thinking. We don't like ambiguity. So our mind would really prefer to break things into easily manageable chunks and imagine that these chunks are independent of the rest of the system and then they work upon each other then it seems simple. We can work with this big, organic, messy life. But something like giant social systems, nobody really understands them. And so, again, any time in history, one group of people might really fret that laws are being passed that crush the thing that's really important to them, not realizing that it's going to be, when we look forward in time, that law that seemed to crush that thing is actually the thing that galvanized all those people and brought them together to create more change than they ever would have if that law that they didn't want passed hadn't been passed. The same thing, we can be really happy that our governing body passes laws that do what we want, not realizing that the end game there is going to be that, oh, that's going to backfire and not turn out the way that we hoped. We attach ourselves often to grabbing out, again, one little aspect of the world we see, placing it against another one, and then pretending that we know what's going to happen, and then often being disappointed because we've tried to force this thing, whether it's in our emotions or socially or just in our family. And that forcing, it doesn't bring the fruits that we've been kind of culturally told. Get out there and do it.
Yeah, this is a touchy topic because if you think allowing is just letting things happen and never taking any action, it's not really that either. It's a middle way. And I think that we talked about patience a little bit ago. There's also this place where you said we're uncomfortable with ambiguity. And I think we're really just uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. And so
Well
I
said.
think about it, so we can talk about social, sweeping, large, massive things and allowing and forcing. But on a personal level, I think if I am experiencing some anxiety, or I'm experiencing some depression, or I'm experiencing frustration and anger, even aggression, that is highly uncomfortable for me. And I want out right now. And I will do whatever it takes. God darn it all. And, again, I come back to these motions of it's forcing, it's make it go away. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but occasionally when I get into a place like that, or with a situation with another person and there's some forcing that's happening, sometimes a magical thing will happen where you'll take a moment and instead of all the tension and the clenching, you'll breathe. And even though nothing has really changed, you're suddenly what I would call in the allowing place where you say, here's where I am. I am going to accept that this is the moment I'm in. This is the way I'm feeling now. And also, as you mentioned, get a little bit curious and just say, well, I wonder what would happen if I was just here and I was okay with this. Or I wonder if the other person who's saying something that's riling me up, hey, is there any truth to that? Can I see, are there places, and just starting to ask the questions, what could I learn from this? Is there some value in this where maybe, yes, I'm experiencing anxiety and depression, but someday I might be able to be there for someone else. Just kind of getting curious, kind of getting okay with where we are for the moment. Not forever, just for the moment. The allowing then somehow just begins to shift things. And again, it is really tricky because it is really subtle, and there's a lot that has to do with our mental gymnastics that are going on, our beliefs about the world, our perceptions, in such a way that we have to be careful of the forcing versus the allowing mindset and how we actually set those up in our mind in the first place as concepts.
It's so important because if we imagine this passivity where we just watch somebody being abused and we just step back and go, we're just going to, that's not what we're talking about at all. And this allowing, as we said in the beginning, as you've been explaining, is much more subtle. We've spoken before about the amount of mental energy that happens when we are doing this or that. This happens when we're trying to force things. We force things when we have a resistance. You demonstrated that very well when you were talking about, you could see it. Very good acting. that mental energy that goes into resisting what currently is a lot of static that removes us from the ability to observe the system and to apply more wisdom to it. So, yes, part of all this is that we want to engage with the world in a way that we hope will make positive change. But we enhance our ability to do that when we allow more, when we slow down, when we observe, when we don't jump into judgment. And there's this release of that mental, and that's one of the best parts of it, because that frees us up not only to be able to look at situations in a way that will be more likely to bring a more positive result, but it gives us a different sensation of living. We all know that in modern times we could spend our entire time sitting on a couch looking at a news program feeling clenched about the world and imbibing somebody else's fear potion that they're making money off of at our expense. Or we could be stepping back, realizing there's some things we cannot change. There's some things we have some influence over. There's some things we have a lot of influence over. And trying to apply wisdom through observation and allowing.
There's a reason that going out into nature feels so good. And it's something that I also experience in my relationship with having Divine Mother. And that is that if you are to go outside and, let's say, take a walk in the woods, the trees are allowing you to be how you are. You do not have to change your attitude. You do not have to fix your broken relationships. You do not have to understand everything in order for you to be gifted with the beauty of the sun coming through the spring leaves, or the smell of plum blossoms on the air, or the sound of birds. Nature allows you and I and all the things to be. And there is something that is so freeing about that. And it's the same for me, at least with Divine Mother. I feel that she is, in a way, the ultimate allower. And I don't have to know everything, be everything, fix everything, and make it happen right now. I can take as long as I need. I can never figure it out. And that will not alter the love that she has for me. The love, it's hard to explain because I don't see it like a person love, or the experiences that, or the magic that comes into my life. I am not judged by her and then doled out, hey, you did good, so here's your good stuff. Oh, you did poor, so, coal for you. And I just think it's really important that we begin to cultivate for ourselves this very subtle state of allowing that, though it is subtle, is very powerful. And that's one way to do it, is to go out into nature and to feel that feeling of allowing that we're always being gifted by being out in the natural world.
That's so beautifully put. I'm just thinking of the stars and the clouds moving so swiftly over them last night, and this beautiful experience that was available to anyone. And you're right, it could be the quote worst person or the quote best person. Nature delivers the opportunity for those gifts to all of us. It's this unconditional love. And I think in a mystical sense that this is, in a way, the whole setup, the whole game. Here I am. I feel like Kenton is a fragile little solid thing, independent thing in the universe, and then that makes me think of everything else as its own little independent things. And the whole game becomes trying to push these other objects around so that they fit to make my life what I want it to be. And that's people and things and money and everything. I'm just trying to push it around to make it do what I want. And obviously we spend often a lot of time in frustration because the best laid plans of mice and men, but I'm misquoting that.
Oh my goodness, let's not worry about it right now. We get what you mean.
And Divine Mother is asking us to fall in love. When we fall in love, that sense of self starts to become less rigid. And when that becomes less rigid, then we start to feel our intimacy, our connection, our interwovenness with all these other things that seemed like things before. And as that starts to unfold, then naturally we start to become less eager to try to push those things around. We recognize that this thing, if I can even call it a thing, is interwoven with this thing and this thing and this thing. And they're all affecting each other. When I push this, it might affect all these other things in ways that I don't know.
Strands in the web.
Yes.
It's I think it's important that we realize that if we're forceful, it's okay. I'm just thinking about, we can even carry it to that extreme. Well then, I did this and that was bad. But you can go down the forceful road however far that you are, and you can always stop and decide, okay, I'm going to allow. And it's that age-old story of who knows what's good or bad with the farmer and his son brings a horse, and yay, it's great, and all the neighbors are hoo-hoo, and then the next day the farmer's son breaks his leg, on and on until the army doesn't, take his son because who knows, right? And that's where, if we had a forcing mindset, each one of those things would be wonderful and a tragedy and wonderful and a tragedy, back and forth on the seesaw. And if we go to the who really knows and get curious and say, I don't know where this is going to lead, we free up that mental energy that you were talking about. And there is something amazing. I feel as though when I see people who are freed up, where their mental energy is freed up, you see it and feel it from them. And they are this incredible force in the world that their almost intrinsic message that they're emanating out is just, it's all right, here we are, and this is enough, in a great way, a satisfying way.
I love being in the presence of people that have that. I feel like a few of our forest monks in their time in the woods developed into that sort of personality, and I'd love just being in the presence of that because it feels so different. I can really feel when I encounter somebody that tension of doing. It's like a tangible kind of shell or something that surrounds a lot of people, and it's probably just a mental
training
energy.
Sorry. It's like something we get used to over time so much. In fact, that's the other thing, is we can think it's us that's doing, me, here's that little Rebecca fragile shell, and I'm the one. But there's lots of cultural goo. There's lots of pre-programming before you even have a chance to know that that's happening to you. And that's, again, the allowing. Allowing is like, forcing is like a dam or a force or a pushing or a constricting, and the allowing is motion forward, or in all directions. It's a free flowing, even though sometimes when we say allowing, all we're doing is actually not doing. But in a weird way, not doing has more ability to transform.
Yeah, I feel like that's something I really try to pass on in the martial arts training that I do in the Peaceful Warrior martial arts. And it's, if you don't know about that part of me, it's kind of like self-defense-y jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, where we learn to deal with things like hair pulling and eyes, and and so in that, when we force, then it just becomes strength against strength, and people find themselves exhausted, and
Mm-hmm.
if they are the weaker one, they find themselves completely overwhelmed. But if we learn to redirect that energy, if we learn to flow with things, to be curious, to then those human bodies moving against each other, trying to get locks, and there's there's something else that happens there that not only is effective, right, for reducing conflict
Mm-hmm.
in an emergency situation, but in the practice of it, it's something that most people love. It's so fun. It feels complex and organic and exciting, and there's when we get into that blend and flow, it feels natural to us. It makes us smile. There's an ease to it that, to me, just feels so different than like a lot of my martial arts training, which was push against,
Mm-hmm.
force.
Yeah.
And that just, I mean, sorry to
Well,
break down to fun, but it was never very fun.
well, fun is super important. We've talked about that, about seriousness, and that's the thing. Forcing is serious, and I think it causes disappointment, frustration, aggression, all sorts of things. And allowing it is scary and sometimes uncertain and vulnerable, and also curious and playful and fun. I loved your analogy of the martial arts because, in a weird way, there is force, right? It's not like you don't touch each other at all.
Right,
I
yeah.
mean, you're in
A lot.
headlocks and, but yet the idea, the energy, the concept is not making it happen. It is being curious and seeing what unfolds. And I think what kind of sprang into my mind was in interpersonal relationships, I thought about fighting. I thought about having a disagreement with someone.
Mm.
And I really believe that when we have a disagreement with someone else, we are not really in a receptive place. And that one or both parties are unable to get into that allowing place. And that validation is the first step in the allowing. And validating, we could do a complete other video on validating. Validating is that same thing, similar to the martial arts. Instead of a forcing, instead of it's my way and you did this, and is a let's step back and acknowledge that we're each human beings. And we talked about this in a previous message. We have a whole history that's led us up to this moment, that's given us the ways we interpret things, and whatever, we've had to sleep this night or whatever. It's the same is true for the other person. Okay, they also have that entire history. So could I just for a moment allow them to feel, hey, honey, I am sorry. It must be so hard to feel that I didn't hear you, whether or not I think I did or I didn't, whether or not I'm like, I heard you and I said this. It's like, no, this other person I love and care about, or this other human being on this planet is having an experience, and I can at least acknowledge you're having this experience, you know, and I can be open to that. And so to me, that feels, because then from there, the conversations that unfold seem so much more meaningful, and you usually end up realizing that you have more in common, that you actually care about each other, and so I just, that it was like the physical,
Yeah.
forcing versus allowing, and then kind of verbal or interpersonal relationship, the forcing versus the allowing. So validating to me seems like the allowing of what is there, and then we can see what's going on. As usual, I could probably talk about this for a really long time because there's so many different, so many different parts to it. But it's probably time for you to share with us your thoughts,
Yeah.
and to lend even maybe more clarification to this allowing, the unfolding, the being with something, and the ways that you experience that in your own life. I would be really curious about that, how you practice allowing and how that feels different from forcing or making something happen.
Thank you again for joining us today. It's really nice to have this time with you. And we'll talk with you in the comments.
Mwah.